as an ugly girl, the witch in all the fairy tales, the dyke. I'd fought to carve out my own rules, my own standards of beauty, my own bleeding litmus tests of desire. And in an instant, she cut me to the core. My foot in midair came down silently after only a moment's hesitation. Inside myself, I stumbled to the ground. But my will is made of sterner stuff than that. I kept walking, silently, lightly on the balls of my feet towards her while her words rang in my ears. It was the first night I was ever flogged. First night we ever played a full scene. First night I'd ever pain-bottomed. I remember it now in pieces. Her voice running the scene, telling me to pick a number, to count the strokes only when they were too much. I kneeled at the end of the bed, pressing my cheek against the sheets with my arms tied to hooks in the frame. I don't tie pretty knots, she'd said. I tie knots that stay. These are all fragments. What never left me, though, over all those years, was walk a little more gracefully. We did talk months later. I told her how the clothes and the isolation were nothing to me. But when she had said what she said when I came into the room, I wanted you a little off balance, she'd said. I laughed, and my throat tightening around memory. That was the thing you did that hurt most. She stared at me, making me feel like I often did, that she could see straight through me. If I had known it would have hurt you like that, I wouldn't have said it. And I don't remember what I said next. When we were together, I was devoted to her. I felt this magical certainty that my top knew everything, noticed everything, that all was deliberate and I was loved and wanted and as safe as I could be as my skin bloomed bruises. I also knew this wasn't true, that my top was not infallible or fearless. It was a suspension of disbelief, something that made the scene work, made our sex and ecstasy possible. We had our roles to play. Another night, a few months later, we were playing in public. I was topless this time, only my underwear and my trusty decade-old thigh-high fishnets and garter belt giving me any armor. I was in a different mood. My hair was short then, and I stood this time, my wrists bound by cuffs but not restrained. My top told me to hold the chains that hung above me, but I wasn't tied or clipped to them. And at one point, she used a flail with leather tails about 18 inches long, tipped with decorative silver studs. The tips scattered like beads across the floor, tearing out their ends against my skin, and I almost laughed. I slammed the chains against the wall, making a sound like crashing thunder throughout the dungeon and resetting my trembling muscles for the next blow. "I see you," she said, stepping close to my back and whispering in my ear, showing off how tough you are. A tough bottom. There was pride and scorn in her voice, like I was hers. Like I might look tough, but we both knew better. The switch in me almost rose to the challenge, and I gripped the chains hard with both hands to keep from wheeling around and flipping the script on her. But I knew what we were to each other. I think it's a bottom's secret how tough you actually are. Of course, vulnerability is a top secret too. When I was with my top for a long time when we played, I would weep. I had so much crying to do, and her fists and flails and needles broke through the dam I kept fortified. I trusted her to break me down, to hold me open while my tears flooded the world. I trusted her not to drown. We only did piercing together once. I lay on our bed in the sun-drenched room and found myself whispering, "I'm so scared, I'm so scared, I'm so scared." How painful would it be to have her run needles under my skin? Would I be able to do this? Would I disappoint her? I'm so scared, I'm so scared. I found it, I couldn't stop saying it as she laid out the sterile needles on the bedside table. And I'm sure my eyes dilated because the room was so bright. She turned her face to meet mine and leaned in close. But I'm not. And just like that, I dropped. I could be terrified. I could be less than the tough, put-together, ferocious person I am every day and be something else. Why? Because she wasn't scared. She wasn't afraid of me. The last time we played together was in public. It was the only time we played together where I called an end to the scene. We had our rhythms at that point, and I knew the scene I was in. She'd blindfolded me while I sat on a bench facing a mirrored wall in the dungeon. I could feel her in the room, like the way my brain always knows where my right hand is. People say you don't know when the last time will be, but I felt it coming. I wondered how she would remember me. And I wept uncontrollably at the thought, knowing for certain that I would never, could never, know how or even if she would remember me. She took off my blindfold suddenly and my eyes found hers immediately. Her face was everything in the world then, like it would be when I sat across the couch from her in our therapist's office a few weeks later, and we said the words that ended our relationship. I looked into her eyes and touched her face with my hand. I loved you well. I wasn't asking. I was laying it down. Look around, Emily. And though it pained me to break her away from her gaze, I was obedient and looked in the mirror. My eyes came into focus on a few dozen other people, sitting and standing against the opposite wall, watching us. I saw my best friend, and other friends, and others whose faces I will remember. And I thought how beautiful we all were. My broken heart flashed over all of them like the beam from a lighthouse. When I think of community, that tableau of friends and comrades and past lovers is what I remember most. I will remember all of your faces, even if I never tell these stories again.
Reader is going to be Kelli.
So I promised, by a kind of semi-popular demand, that I would tell the story of what I did to celebrate my 38th birthday, but it's not really a story, so it's like a little mini story. So to celebrate my 38th birthday, I was in San Francisco, and I decided that I was going to fist 38 people in 38 days. And I didn't. I fisted 38 people in 30 days. Which is super easy if you're fresh meat in San Francisco. And also because people would, when people kind of got behind me, it was like it was more community than sex, really, because people would be like, oh, I totally have some friends. And then they would come back the next day and bring their own lube and like 3 of their friends. So it's extremely efficient. So, but that's not really a story. That's just what happened. So I'm turning 44 this year. So if you have any suggestions for 44 in 44 days, I'm taking suggestions. Okay, so
What's the deal?
I guess it's going to be New York. It might be the Deep South. I'm doing a Deep South tour in May, so I don't know if that's possible. Yeah, I'll try to fist 44 people in Mississippi. That sounds like that might not have a good ending. All right, so one of the things I feel like are most transformative about leather is kind of our juxtapositions, right? Like the fact that we take things that hurt people every day, like the misuse of power. Why is the world so fucked up? Misuse of power, right? And pain. You know, for most people, the idea if pain is something to be avoided at all costs, and that's not how we see pain, right? So it's like this juxtaposition and this paradox. I have something that I feel like kind of illustrates that very well. When I was a kid, I grew up on a beet farm in, like Dwight Schrute. People always think I'm saying beef because I'm from Wisconsin, but it was actually a beet farm.